Hello everybody, and welcome to our next video lesson for English 205, Business Communication in its Rhetorical Context. Good evening if it is evening for you, good morning if it is morning for you. Today we are going to be starting to talk about business ethics. Ethics is a required portion of this course. It is something that we have to take a look at. So let's get into it. Let's talk about what is ethics. So what is ethics? Well, it is not that which is illegal. So something can be legal and still be unethical. So you don't want to confuse legal with ethical, because there's lots of things that are perfectly legal but could be considered unethical. For example, charging a customer more than a fair profit margin for a product that costs only pennies to make could be considered unethical, but it is perfectly legal. Like a t-shirt, for example. A t-shirt that is made in Bangladesh for $1, and then the company turns around and charges $50 to consumers in America. So there's actually two ethical issues there. The first is that the company is charging a massive profit margin for the t-shirt, and the second ethical issue is, of course, the potential exploitation of foreign laborers who make the t-shirt, in this case Bangladesh. So, because companies in the United States can, for the most part, set their own prices, when you're dealing with profit, there can definitely be ethical issues involved with a level of profit that is ethically acceptable. It's all legal. I mean, a company can charge whatever they want, whatever they can get away with. But is it ethical? That's the question. And of course, when we talk about profit margins, we tend, in economics, we learn that profit margins are set by the market, and that's not always true. For example, do you know how to comparison shop for medical procedures? Chances are you probably don't. So the cost for medical procedures is not set by market forces. So that's another ethical issue right there. Okay, so we've established that ethics is not that which is illegal. It's also not morality. Morality is defined and absolute, like thou shalt not kill. With morality, there is no gray area. Ethics, on the other hand, seeks to answer questions of morality. What is ethical will also change based on the situation. An example is lying. Is it ever ethical to lie? So your first instinct might be to say, well, of course not. It's never ethical to lie. Really? Well, what if a friend of yours gets a haircut that you think is just hideous? Is it ethical to tell them that haircut is hideous? This is where it gets into a gray area, because on the one hand, you don't want to hurt their feelings, but on the other hand, you don't want them to be humiliated by going out in public with that haircut. And that's what makes the issue of lying a great ethical issue, because it's not an easy black and white answer. So something like dumping toxic waste. That's not a very good ethical issue, because it's not really an ethical issue. Everyone would agree that dumping toxic waste is not a good thing to do. So a good ethical issue is something where there is not a clearly defined answer as to what is the right thing to do. So ethics is where we are trying to figure out and make an argument for what is the best course of action. So, why large corporations are more likely to have ethical problems? Number one, they have no single moral viewpoint like in a mom and pop store. So what that means is when you have a small business like a mom and pop store, the morality of that company is set by the owner. And the owner then hires people who reflects his or her morality. So small businesses have a much easier time establishing an ethical standard. But when you have a large corporation that may have thousands, or even like Walmart, for example, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of employees, because Walmart is the largest corporation in the world, you don't have a single ethical standard. You have thousands, hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands, I should say, of ethical standards. Everyone in the company has their own standard of ethics. Large companies, number two, are also divided into many departments like human resources and sales and marketing. And so, again, you don't have that centralized ethical standard. A third is large companies tend to be primarily focused on stockholder value. Which can lead them to do unethical things to increase stockholder value. Like, for example, layoffs, which reduce the bottom line cost to the corporation, thereby increasing stockholder value. Yes, but it is, of course, potentially unethical. And finally, large companies have a huge impact on society and the environment because of their sheer size. Your average small business doesn't have anywhere near that kind of impact. So, in ethics, we don't talk about stockholders, we talk about stakeholders. So what is a stakeholder? A stakeholder is anyone who is affected by the actions of a company. That isn't just the stockholders. That is employees. That is people who live around the business in the community, the environment, suppliers. So anybody who is affected by the actions of the company is a stakeholder. So that means that, large corporations like Walmart, again, have a lot of stakeholders, a huge number of stakeholders, people who are affected by the actions of Walmart. So we want to think about stakeholders as opposed to stockholders. So what this means is that because large corporations don't have a single ethical standard, they have to create one. And when you did assignment 1 and went through your corporation's website, you might have seen things about corporate responsibility. And what that is the corporation trying to establish an image, an ethical standard that it will function by. But it has to be forced. It's something that they have to force upon all employees because they don't have a single ethical standard. So they try to create an image of a good corporate citizen. You'll hear a lot about the term corporate citizenship, which is the role in which corporations play within our society. So here we start getting into actually what's called the rhetorical triangle. It's different from the rhetorical triangle that I showed you earlier. This one is, of course, ethos, pathos, and logos. These are also called the Aristotelian appeals because they were created by Aristotle. So, if you notice, pathos has a heart. That is because pathos is an appeal to emotion. Logos as the brain, logos is an appeal to logic. And then ethos is the man. And that's because ethos is an appeal using credibility. It is saying, I am a person worth listening to, and here's why. But the thing with ethos is that you have to create ethos. Ethos isn't automatically given. In some cases, it's automatically given. Like, for example, why are you listening to me right now? You're listening to me right now because I'm the professor of this course. You assume that I wouldn't be the professor of this course if I didn't know somewhat what I was talking about. So you're listening to me because I have a built-in ethos that is given to me by Cal State Northridge. You listen to a police officer because they have a built-in ethos. You listen to a doctor because they have a built-in ethos. But in most of our daily interactions, people have to create ethos. It's not just automatically given. And particularly in the business world, businesses have to create ethos. In other words, you're not going to trust Walmart just because Walmart says we're Walmart. They have to earn your trust. So, ethos, using character, credibility, and ethics to persuade. And that's the one that we're going to be focusing on the most. The other, you can see pathos and logos there, but those right now are less important. So, assignment 2 guidelines. You want, for this assignment, to pick a real ethical issue facing a real business, a real corporation, okay? No case studies. You don't want to make this up. You want a real ethical issue. So how are you going to find that? Well, you just do some research. And also think about your interactions with corporations, maybe times that you felt wronged or somebody that you know felt wronged. But then you have to ask yourself, is that an ethical issue? Is there a gray area that can be debated? Number 2, the ethical issue must not yet have been resolved. So, if the situation has been resolved, you can't use it. Like when I first started teaching this course, it was shortly after Enron went bankrupt. And so, and you can look up on Wikipedia, Enron, but that Enron is an ethical issue, and it's the ethical issue having to do with honest accounting, but it wouldn't work for this assignment because the situation's been resolved, the company's been bankrupt and liquidated, so that doesn't work. You want to create a memo addressed to a person who can solve your ethical issue, and that's not me. You must address this memo to a specific person who can resolve your ethical issue, whether that's the CEO of the company or the head of some government agency that can implement some sort of regulation to fix the ethical issue. So, and then your first paragraph should say something sincerely complimentary, if possible. The reason that you want to do that is because you want the person receiving the memo to listen to you. And it's a lot easier to listen if somebody says something nice about you first. It also shows that you've done some research into the company, and it also shows that this is not an attack letter. This is a legitimate attempt to solve a problem. But I have gotten assignments where, like, it's dealing with the ethics of cigarettes, and it will compliment Philip Morris on their the growth of their cigarette market, which is obviously insincere. So you don't want to do that. The second paragraph should detail the ethical failure in great, great detail. Because again, it's ethos. You got to show that you know what you're talking about. The third paragraph should provide then a detailed solution, and really detailed solution. How are you going to fix this problem? What is your solution for fixing this issue? And it should be as detailed as possible. Because again, both 4, 5, and 6 all establish ethos. And then you want to use a general memo format, which you can search online. I'm not a stickler for format, but you want to use a memo format, and you can search for that online. Okay, and I'm coming to the end of this video, so we're probably going to wrap this up, and I will continue with my remaining points in part 2 of this video, okay? Have a good night. I'll see you in the next video.